would like to switch to some very special people that I will invite now to show their faces. And they are our amazing Ashoka Fellows that work in the field of sports for social good. And I wanted to invite them here with us so that we can learn and get inspired for the kind of people who saw in sports a really important tool to achieve greater social impact and to achieve some large scale change. Thank you so much, Fabrice and Mel, for joining the conversation. I hope you also enjoyed a little bit of, the insights that you can get out of the Romanian ecosystem of changemakers that use sport for social good. And I would like to give you a brief 5 minutes to introduce yourself, to tell a little bit of 5 to 10 minutes, how you would like more to tell a little bit about your stories and how you are contributing to this world with the help of sports. And then I will go through my questions and my curiosities, because I have a lot of them for both of you. And maybe I would start with you, Fabrice, since one of the issues that was actually mentioned also by Sylvia and Razvan was about the human resources and this part of the professionals working in the field. And since what you do is closely tied with coaches, maybe we could start with your perspective and how are you driving change by actually shifting the role in your ecosystem.
Yeah, that works for me. So you said 5 to 10, right?
Yeah. Just use, don't
Sure.
mind the time.
Okay. Well, I won't use 30. So 5 to 10 is fine for me. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. You mentioned that we were very special people. So I don't know exactly about that, in the sense that, in my view, from what I gathered from the study, all the people who have participated and who are here in this call are doing their best and doing whatever they think is relevant to affect change and more specifically use sports as a tool. And I'm just trying to contribute to the best of my abilities. I would also mention that I don't have specific knowledge of the Romania context, and my comments will all be based on my experience in Canada and Montreal and Quebec more specifically. Now, that being said, I guess that sports as a tool for social change is universal. So I can still relate to what I've seen a bit earlier. So I was born in Montreal. My parents came from Haiti. So I'm a second generation immigrant in Canada. And in my personal background, I grew up, I would say, being witness to many inequalities at multiple levels. So there's that has been very present in my upbringing, as much as the importance that my parents gave to the importance of education. I also played sports. So I fell in love with I played soccer when I was a child. Then I fell in love with basketball, started playing on a sports team when I was 11. And my sports coaches always, I guess, very often were the people that helped me build my own character, gain self-esteem, and develop my leadership, because I was super short and shy, and I didn't want to assert myself. Well, my sports coaches were very helpful in contributing in building my own personal character. And at the age of 16, I started coaching myself. And it was always clear that my intention was to support the youth that I was coaching beyond the sport aspect, and really see how I could impact their life, similarly to what I had received. Now, it so happens that unfortunately, many coaches have that influence, and research suggests that coaches are the most influential, significant adults to youth who play sports after the parents. But it's only a minority of coaches who really have that knowledge or the tools or the values to really tap into that potential. So there's a huge gap between the importance of the coach and the coach's abilities, and that's an issue that we see all over the world. And I don't know about the coach education system in Romania, but to my knowledge, the UK, Australia, and Canada are and some Scandinavian countries as well have very complete and thorough coach education systems. But then again, it's usually mostly focused on the professional aspects of sports and not the more holistic approach to supporting youth. And we see that in how coaches are being trained. We see that in the focus that is placed sometimes more on competition rather than a more holistic approach. And I've seen that throughout my life where coaches really had behaviors that were somehow inconsistent with the intention of that I see as being relevant in a sports setting. Well, whether it be about social and educational outcomes. And the Pour Trois Points, the organization that I founded, is based on that premise that sport is not the only way, but is one way to contribute to tackling social inequalities by supporting those coaches who can have an impact in their communities. So we've created some sort of a leadership development program for coaches that is designed to support them, and we say, so that they can really systematically play a role at a scope that is broader. And there are many coach training programs out there. I haven't seen many that really have that long-term development impact that is, in my view, necessary to support personal growth. And that's the attempt that we've made through that program. And the intervention itself is at a fairly small scale within the Ashoka language. We will talk about, it's more about, I guess, scaling out and scaling deep. It's really, there's direct service, but there's really, we're really rooted in our community in one city. And when you can imagine, well, when you train one coach, the coach has an impact on 10, 15 kids per year. And that's how you can have an indirect impact on all the youth that are being supported. But beyond that, Pour Trois Points, that has been created, was officially created in 2011. I've been full-time on it since 2014. Had an impact, I guess, at a broader scale in the understanding the importance that we see. Okay, the impact that I see is how much coaches are being more and more talked about as being important in educational settings. So we are not the only ones that have participated to that change, but we have collaborated with many other stakeholders to have some sort of a mindset shift towards acknowledging that coaches play an important role, which is not often seen as being the case. And this also leads to more and more conversations that we see around how the government is involved in improving the quality of coaching overall. And there's also part of the impact, in my view, is just to have conversation that we currently have, to share ideas and share thoughts so that just the knowledge be spread and get to a point where you know, whether it be in Romania or elsewhere. Prior to the pandemic, I was invited to another event in Algeria, organized by another Ashoka fellow. So, you know, how can we create this network where we share information? That's something that I did deeply believe in. So I'm happy to meet the people that are in the call, to hear Mel as well. In Canada, there are also other stakeholders, whether it be fellow Ashoka, Claudine Labelle, founder of Fitspirit. So I don't know if we're going to be able to find, you know, to include the information. So I'll be able to include it. But in Canada, we have other great social entrepreneurs who are fellows, or sometimes who are not, that are doing great work out there. And I do believe that the more and more we're just connected, just to share ideas, the broader impact we can have. And I'm very impressed with what Ashoka Romania is doing, because the work that you're doing around sport for social change within the Ashoka network is something that I have not seen yet in Canada. So that inspires me to think about how Ashoka Canada can play more of a leadership role in doing such an analysis and see how we can achieve greater impact together. So those would be my comments.
Fabrice, don't worry, we're going to involve you in further stages as well.
Great, it will be my pleasure. So I'm gonna put, I'm stopping here for now. I know that you may have questions. And while Mel is talking, I'm just gonna put the link.
I'm really curious about the alliances that you build that helps you, you know, scale what you're doing, and also the certificate that you have, because that's also interesting that you built. But now I would like to go to Mel, and Mel is doing something really interesting because he developed one of the biggest organizations in sports in the world. He developed Homeless World Cup, and he uses football as a means to inspire, empower homeless people and change their life. And for me, Mel, what I would like to get out of your story is, how do you build this idea so that it becomes, you know, such a global phenomenon, because it's present everywhere. And even in Romania, we have someone in Timișoara who yearly brings teams to this competition. So how do we grow these initiatives, and what are the kinds of insights that we can find so that they grow so big?
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm honored to be part of your event today. I found the first part of it very, very interesting in terms of research, in terms of what's going on. I also enjoyed Fabrice's comments there, and congratulations to you, because I think you're one of the few social organizations that's actually doing this mapping and having a look at this and see.
Mel, I'm going to stop your video. I think you're having not that good internet connection. Let's see if this works better for you.
Is that? Can you hear me?
Bits and pieces, but let me see if we can stop our videos as well. Maybe that it's also going to help you.
Okay, how is that?
Yeah, now it's great. Go ahead.
It's better?
Yes.
Okay, do you want me to say that again, what I just said?
If you could, that would be really great.
Okay. Okay, I apologize about the technology. So first of all, I would like to say thank you very much for inviting me to your event. I very much enjoyed the conversations so far. The research is very, very interesting. I enjoyed Fabrice's comments as well. And I would endorse what he's saying, because I think, congratulations to you, because I think this is the first mapping I've seen of this type of work of sports and social entrepreneurship anywhere. So hopefully it can be built upon. To answer your question, we came up with this idea of the Homeless World Cup in 2003. It was an idea. I had been working with homeless people anyway, and we developed a network of homeless organizations through street papers around the world. And I came up with the idea with a colleague who had a street paper in Austria. Now, our driving thought behind it initially was that football and sport in particular is, as you mentioned in your introduction, a common language that people understand. Everybody understands it. And homeless people understand it. And it also is a very simple game. You just need a ball and you can kick it and you can involve people. And the issue for us around homelessness was that people were very isolated and on their own. And if we could bring them in simply by kicking a ball around, then we could work with them and try and use the football as a way of getting them off the streets. So, as you said, we work in over 70 countries around the world, including Romania, and we have this annual competition where teams come to play. Now, so we had the idea, and it's in some senses quite easy to have ideas. We all have them. We all have kind of magic discussions with each other wherever, and we come up with ideas. But the key is, how do you turn that idea into action, into reality? And I think that what we had in our case, because we were social entrepreneurs and we were doing street papers and we were working globally, we had an initial platform and we had a vision of the world rather than just our own city, our own country. And so we were able to build on that. And we also picked on a sport that everyone in the world knew and understood. I mean, in the USA and Australia, they call it soccer. We in Europe, we call it football, but it doesn't matter. It's a round ball. And the other issue about it was it's very inexpensive. I mean, you just need a ball, and you can play 2 a side or 20 a side or whatever, and it's a way of involving people. So we then had to think about how do we scale this very, very quickly. And so the way we did it, first of all, we had the idea. Then we thought through about the plan to develop it, and basically we have developed it's an international sports federation, except it officially isn't, but that's what it is. And we have one partner per country, so we have one partner in Romania, one partner in England, one partner in India, and then that partner works on the ground, and everybody shares the common values, and because it's this simple game. So we can build the organization accordingly. So what we have is shared values, shared understanding, a relatively simple model on the ground, and then we can build unity around it. And that's what makes this so successful. So the real heroes, in a sense, in our organization are the people who run these organizations like Miha in Romania, and the homeless people themselves, who become inspired by the football and the potential of representing their country, and they really are representing their country because we have some very big audiences. We had over 150,000 people came to watch the Homeless World Cup when we were in Mexico one time. 150,000 people over a week watching homeless people play football with the media. So we're destroying stereotypes of the view of homeless people as being bad people into being heroes for their country and to create change. So the way we built the organization was really based on some key values, one of which was trust. So we trust our network partners. Secondly was one of ambitions around working with the people that we work with and changing their lives. So a great deal of commonality between us, and then the simplicity of football, which is a common language amongst our homeless people and amongst the people who work with them around the world. So you pull all that passion together around some simplicity with some shared values, and you have really successful outcomes. So we've worked with 1.2 million people collectively around the world since we started. Huge percentages of them have changed their lives as a result. I could go on talking for a long time about this particular initiative. You have on the screen there unfortunately, because of the COVID, we had to cancel this year's event. So on Sunday, we're having this special online event, which will be great and it'll be good for our partners, but it's not like the real thing. But it's our attempt to try and do something because we're naturally entrepreneurs and try to be innovative. There's lots of other things I could say about sport because I'm involved in other aspects of sport now, working with government in the UK. But I'll maybe stop just now because I believe, as you've said, and Fabrice also, is that sport is a very, very powerful tool to create change. What I'm describing is I have absolute evidence of it, and I know hundreds of people who are going nowhere, who are very, very low, who've changed their lives. And this is very uplifting and inspiring. But it's sport that's the vehicle that can do this. Now, if you can create a method in Romania or something else, actually, which could be inspired around the world, then this is fabulous. One of the criticisms I have sometimes of our own sector, and I would include myself in this probably, is that we are sometimes too disparate. We are doing our own little thing in our own little world, and maybe we're doing good things, but actually, if you look up and create networks with other organizations and with other people, then the impact for yourself, your organization, and the whole is much, much greater. So what you're doing is very exciting.
Thank you so much, Mel, for sharing about your stories and about your wisdom, as you are one of the elders of our community, and we always enjoy to get and grasp your insights. Now, what I would like to maybe touch a little bit upon, and going back to Fabrice, we talked that sports is an universal language that brings people together. I'm really curious to understand what were other elements that helped you build the needed alliances with local authorities, with schools, with other coaches, so that you can put your model forward and open it up for as many people as possible.
So do I technically do I just use my camera?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I would say that within the context of sports for social change, it occurs to me that it is relevant to align the innovation with various interests that are at stake. And I would put them in two categories. And I don't, sometimes it's not convenient to make categories, but in this case, I would make two categories. One of them is to build bridges with those who are not within the sports context, but who have other, I guess, priorities, whether it be in education, in health, in fighting homelessness, for example, like Mel explained. Well, I mean, which is at the root of his innovation, from my understanding, is to really make clear how the innovation that is put forward responds to the priorities of others who don't have sports as a priority. So that's one thing that I feel like that is very relevant. So even in Canada, Pour Trois Points is structured as a nonprofit registered as a charity. Well, even sports does not qualify in Canada as being a category of activity that allows us to be a registered charity. So we had to explain at the root of our, even in our structure, we had to explain why what we do fights poverty, why what we do supports education. So, and that has been the way for us to connect with other stakeholders throughout our So whether it be donors, they don't donate because of the sports, they donate because of the outcome. And we make clear that it's the why that matters. And that's the one category, but at the same time, it is a struggle, not a struggle, it is a challenge to do that demonstration while still being rooted in the sports context. And from my experience, and I wouldn't suggest that it's the same for all contexts, but from my experience, many stakeholders within the sports environment don't necessarily have a deeply integrated intention of supporting sports for other outcomes in sports. So to make it clear that even though we're talking about education, it's still going to be basketball, it's still going to be soccer, it's still going to be hockey, and it's still going to be about having fun. It's still going to be about, to some extent, competition. So to really be rooted in, the context is about sports for other outcomes, makes it realistic to find coaches who are going to be part of the program, to rally businesses who are aligned with sports outcomes. So to align with professional sports teams as well. So striking that balance, not being too focused on traditional sports, but at the same time, not being totally disconnected. Because, for example, if I'm going to take an example, if I, our work is really rooted in personal growth. Well, if we as an organization just start promoting meditation all day, we're going to miss the boat because we're likely to promote something that our constituents as sports people don't care about. So it's always been about balancing and being authentic with ourselves while honoring that the sports sector has its interests, but other stakeholders have their own interests. And I would end by saying that I've seen it times and times, and we've made that mistake. Trying to pretend that sports in and of itself is the solution is not an easy, is not a sell that is convincing. It's really about how sports can be used for other outcomes that really makes it clear for whether it be schools, community organizations, cities, and that's the key. Promoting the other outcome and making it clear that sports is just a context, or in French we say un prétexte. I speak French, it's my first language, but I don't know if we say that in English. It's an excuse.
The same is the pretext, and it's the pretext. In Romanian, it's the same pretext. So.
Yeah, it's a pretext. It's a powerful pretext, but it's still the pretext.
Thank you so much, Fabrice, and I think it's really important what you say to make sure that we. And I think that's the whole purpose of this conversation, to start talking about the sports beyond the usual way that we talk, from the performance perspective, from the issues that we have, but also to see how actually sports can contribute to the changes and the impact that we are seeing around the world.
And I will also mention quickly that that's my opinion. Doing that, I think it's important to also acknowledge that there's many people who don't see sport that way, and the mainstream conversation about sports, it is changing, but there's lots of, we've seen it at the Olympics, we've seen it at multiple levels. It's not always about, I'm not talking about in Olympics in general, I'm talking about whether it be like doping problems and whatnot. There's a wave of narrative around sports that contradicts the very reason why we're gathered here together. So to be clear that exists and that we should also navigate that environment, that's what I was referring to as well, within what I was referring to as being the sports environment.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think having this both perspectives, one on looking at the outcomes, but also being aware of the narrative that others in the sector have, so that we also build our narrative, taking into consideration those other actors. That's really relevant. And thank you so much. And now, Mel, I would go back to you, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, the work that you do with the government, but because I think this is also a level very, very relevant for us in Romania, because it's something that we're striving to work with local authorities, with central public authorities to instill this kind of changes that we see of need for society. So we're really curious to see how it worked for you.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to share that. I think, again, Fabrice's intervention is very relevant here. I think, with us at Homeless World Cup, for example, when we're talking with our homeless guys, we don't even refer to them as homeless guys. They're footballers. It's about the sport. The sport's the powerful connector. When Mexico won the cup one year, thousands of people greeted them and they went to meet the president, and it was all about the cup. When we're speaking to other people, maybe in government or maybe in the voluntary sector, then we're talking about the outcomes, which is really what our raison d'etre. Our raison d'etre is to try and end homelessness. Now, to the point about where government sits in this. So government obviously has huge power in terms of creating change. We as change makers, we can set the agenda, but unless we partner with some of these large institutions, you're not necessarily going to get the change that you want. In Scotland, the government has basically a Quango, which is an arm's length organization for sport, and I'm chair of that organization. Now, very, very important, just to kind of explain where that sits in the overarching government policy, because this is in Scotland. Sport sits within the health portfolio, and the wider implications for the government for health are inactivity. So they will say that looking in the future with their research, issues around obesity and inactivity, particularly among children, are going to save up huge problems for them, health problems, particularly, which will affect their budgets. Therefore, there's a policy imperative to get the nation active. And hello, here's sports. Well, we can get people involved in sports. So what we've developed then in the sport is one system. So it doesn't matter whether you're the most talented athlete and you're going to win a gold medal at the Olympics or a cup at the World Cup, or whether you are just somebody who is not very good at sport but is getting active. It all sits in with our system, and that one system is connected then with outcomes that are in the bigger policy issues for government. So sport, therefore, rather than being seen by a lot of people as not relevant, or if there's going to be pressure on budget, then cut the sports budget because it's part of the entertainment industry. It's not relevant. What's happened in Scotland is that sport is seen as centrally relevant to health policy, and therefore is getting support in terms of budget, because there's other outcomes which are not related to sport, tackling obesity, mental health, and lots of evidence of people involved in sports, mental health improved, etc., etc. Lots of evidence showing that sport is something that is actually tangibly good for the society as a whole.
I think Fabrice had a comment. I don't know if you wanted now, Fabrice, to mention it.
Well, I do have a comment, but I can wait. It's not an urgent comment. It falls in line with what Mel is saying. So I would probably wait until you end your comment, and I'll build on that, because I find this to be very interesting.
Well, I'd more or less kind of finished. So, I have a kind of dual role. I'm the social entrepreneur, set up the Homeless World Cup. That's running, plenty of evidence that works. I have a kind of view that one of the challenges in the system is that, we can get homeless people off the streets, but as soon as we do that, somebody else has arrived. So, Mr. Government, do you think we could have policies where we don't have homeless people ending up in the street? And that would be the same in Canada. But in terms of my other role, which is about as chair of the sports organization, it's about fitting sports in clearly what are overarching government policies that can affect everything. It can affect schools, education, where children are doing what's happening in their curriculum. It can affect criminal justice, getting kids away from criminality, etc., etc., etc. So when government ministers and civil servants begin to understand the role sport can play, then all of a sudden there isn't pressure on our budgets, and people are much more likely to sit down and talk to us about it.
Yeah, thank
Right.
you, Fabrice, please.
Yeah, I've observed the same phenomenon that Mel you've described in Canada and Quebec. I would say that I've been involved in discussions in Canada where we've reflected on the idea that it is sometimes easier for governments, or more relevant for governments to invest in policies and initiatives that are more, I mean, we've used the upstream and downstream terminology to say, well, there are some initiatives or policies that really will fix problems for the short term or be more curative. And it's really clear that, I mean, if you need to take care of people who are sick, well, you're going to invest in hospitals, and the population is asking for that because people see it, and it's really clear that we need to fix some issue. I mean, there's a road that needs to be built or that needs to be repaired is being asked, and it's really more short term. And generally speaking, the conversation was about the notion that I've had with other sports for social change stakeholders in Canada, was about the notion that sports works the other way, in the sense that it's more of a prevention tool, and sometimes it's not, whether it's intangible or it's tangible, more for the long term. So to build off of what Mel is saying, what we've been saying earlier, I feel like the initiatives that has been successful in Canada in partnering with whether it be governments or other institutions, they've been able to make a clear argument that even though the impact is over the long term, it's worth to invest on the short term. And sometimes, storytelling is relevant. Sometimes data is also relevant to really make a compelling case that even though we're not talking about repairing a road or building a hospital that is much needed. We're talking about, for example, preventing health problems over the long term. Well, sports remain part of the solutions. I think we're more and more looking at governments to look at solving problems on the long term and being on the prevention side of things. But that's something that should not be overlooked in how we approach the value of sports as a tool for social change.
Thank you so much, Fabrice. And maybe now I would ask each of you a final question, since we have just 5 minutes and I don't want to take any more of your time. I'm curious, considering the current period that we're living, where do you feel that, or what's going to be the role in of sports in our lives? Because here in Romania, for example, what has happened after some restrictions were lifted is that people got more engaged with sport activities because they couldn't do those while they were at home. So there's that. On the other hand, there are a bunch of sports that we cannot practice because they involved, one-on-one contact. So on your perspectives, and this is a question for both of you, Fabrice and Mel, where do you see, even the attention of the local authorities or governments and the society for sports? I know it's a hard question and complicated one, but
who do you want to go first?
Whomever. I mean, if you want, Mel, you can start.
Oh, okay. It's a very good question. I think for me, one being the social entrepreneur part of me immediately thinks there's an opportunity. So these are very difficult times. Some people have realized that, you know, getting out and going for a run or a walk even, or on a bicycle, they've enjoyed it. So it's a question then of capturing these people somehow into whatever's happening. For the people who aren't able to do some sports, it's a question of still getting in touch with them and saying, hey, well, in 3 months, 6 months, this will come back again, and we want to support you. That's the sort of thing I will be doing locally. I would also, though, be engaging with government right now to say, hey, look, this is what's happening. Social entrepreneurs in the sports sector are providing a lead here. We want to partner with you to have a look at some of these bigger issues. The health crisis is a crisis. It's very destructive and it's bad news, but equally there's so much potential, and social entrepreneurs can provide that lead. We have to grab that now, right now. There's a moment, I think it's now, and that's why it's good to have this conversation. And we need to work harder on it, but we need to change the conversation that's going out there, because we shouldn't be saying, well, we're going to go back to where we were before. We should be saying, hey, sports got an opportunity in terms of its values, people supporting one each other, in terms of our communities coming together, in terms of messages of working together, working as teams, blah, 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 and these health messages I mentioned earlier. So I'd be optimistic, and it's a question of doing more, whilst at the same time, people must stay safe. Stay safe first, stay healthy, and then, hey, let's build something special.
So I agree with what Mel just said, and I would I'll bring another perspective in terms of which crisis we're talking about, right? Because there's a pandemic, and I would also add that there's another crisis that has been going on for years, which is the racism, and George Floyd's death in the U.S. a couple of weeks ago has triggered a movement that will not stop anytime soon, and that a movement that is a response or a reaction to, I really call it a crisis. Racism is, to me, a crisis that is affecting the world. And so it's like, it's an add-on, right? It's on one or the other. It's like both end. And I do believe that sports has always been, and there is racism in sports as there is racism everywhere. But I do believe that sports has this particular potential, and it has played that role of contributing to tackling racism in a very interesting way, because sports is a way to gather people. You know, Mel has stated that earlier as well, and it's really rooted as well in how, you know, who we are as human beings. One of the things that contributes to racism is tribalism. You know, really believing in your tribe and being against another tribe. And that is, before getting to a point where someone is open to be more leaning towards interculturalism or multiculturalism and being open to others, it's still important to build that internal view that, you know, you're still rooted in your family, your community, your city, your country. So identity, I believe, is important, and sports allows to build tribalism in a healthy way, because when you have your uniform, one color matters. It's the color of your uniform, irrespective of the colors of the people wearing the uniform. So I'm really eager, and I look forward to seeing how we can be more proactive in using this particular context, which is sports, which is pretty unique, as a way to build more community and make it healthy to be for your tribe, and your tribe being the city that you're playing for, your school that you're playing for, and even going further, you know, having conversations about now, you know, if you were adversaries, are we enemies, or are we feeding off each other because we just want to have fun? So sports really has a power of playing a key role, in my view, to tackle the issue of racism.
Fabrice, thank you so much for actually bringing it up, because what happened in Romania during this pandemic crisis is that actually racism grew. So actually here in Romania, they fed one each other. And I think this is extremely important what you're saying, that the sports, especially in small communities, can actually bring all these tribes together under an universal umbrella. So thank you so much for the perspective. And Mel as well, thank you for your perspective as well. I think it's also a time to put forward all the change makers and all the social entrepreneurs who are working on grassroots level, who really understand what's happening there. And now they have kind of the opportunity to showcase what you're doing. So thank you so much for both of your perspective.
Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for being here. I have some other questions, but I know that we don't have any time left. But just a message to let for all of those who are still watching us, in autumn, we're also going to start a process of 6 to 8 months of supporting 15 to 20 change makers working with sports, so that we start actually building the community and them getting together and building the connections and striving for the social change that they are aware. So building a capacity building program for them. So if you want to support us, be our partners in our endeavor, where Decathlon already is a partner, get in contact with us. And if you're also interested in knowing more about our Ashoka Fellows, you can find all their profiles on ashoka.org. If you want to get in contact with Fabrice or Mel, just go on their website or contact me and I can put you in contact. And this is an open invitation for all those who want to continue the conversation around sports for social good to get in contact with us, because this is something that we really want to do and build in Romania. And Fabrice and Mel, thank you so much for being here and bringing your insights and your perspectives. And I'm really looking forward to engage you in our future plans here in Romania, because I think your insights and your experiences are also valuable for us, for the local change makers, to inspire them to take action. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you, Mel. I really appreciated your wisdom and your comments, and thank you for participating.
Yeah, for me too. Great to everybody. Great to meet you. Thank you. It's great work and great to meet you, Fabrice. And without continuing the conversation, but very inspired by what's going on in Romania now, and potentially what might build on this great balance.
Yeah, and I also want to bring more Ashoka Fellows working with sports. So we want to grow the conversation. That's going to be really important for us. Okay, thank you all so much. Now we're going to go offline, but thank you for the conversation and can't wait to continue this. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.